Hello guys, as you know I live in Malta right now, and being here I got to know a bit more Mighty Boards, the board game company, and right now they're preparing a game for Kickstarter. Posthuman Saga is the game, it's coming mid-May. So I thought it's a good idea to show you the process of designing and developing a board game, the challenges that pretty much every board game company has to face going through Kickstarter. Also the struggles coming from a small country, possibly, and to have a closer and inside look into the process. Also the inspiration, how it comes, and all the different facets of this beautiful journey. So I'll take you with me. Let's see what's happening inside. Hello guys.
Hello.
Say hello to my little friend.
Oh Jesus.
Friend.
Yeah, so we can either change it now
What
or
are you
later.
working on?
So yes, we're looking at the new graphic design for the cards, making things clearer on the weapons mainly. Yeah, collecting all the things that we need for combat in one place. Because after some testing rounds, we had some feedback from them, and we're changing those. Yeah, and these are the encounter cards.
Okay.
But nothing much is changing here, so we're just moving the narrative to this part, and we'll have just an icon.
Okay. And you added the mutant.
I added the mutation here between the two, between the ranged and the melee.
Because it affects both.
Yeah, there's a change of the
And you've added
typeface
these.
here, same as the other cards. These mainly, because we moved.
What are you working on?
Hello. We had objectives, objective missions that were split into two levels. Objective of level 1 and level 2. We're integrating them into one overall objective. And each of the objectives has got a number of terrain tiles that you have to complete in order to get to the objective. And now that we're integrating them into one, which makes it neater, it creates a bit of a problem of making sure that they're all balanced. So I'm trying to, each line is a different objective, and I'm trying to make all of the lines balanced, because some terrain tiles yield, different terrain tiles yield different resources, so I'm trying to make sure that each objective is relatively balanced. The player is given one objective with one starting story and an ending story, and the whole journey will be plotted on that card, rather than what we have right now, which is two different objectives that they have to fulfill after that. It's not a big change, not a big deal, but it's easier to have one thing that you have to do rather than two cards to live through them. So now we're integrating those into one card that will have your whole journey for level 1 and level 2 on the one card and one story.
All right.
Yeah, so these tiles are what you're seeing here, basically. It's what you need to collect and find trigger actions, and through the auction that happens at the start of most turns, in order to place them on the map. It's a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah, it's a big puzzle, yeah.
Oh wow, guys, we got an email from Kieran.
Okay.
It's the new sculpt for
Oh,
for the scavenger. Wow.
nice.
Yeah, I love the
Can I see the front?
angry.
Serious man. Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, I think it needs some kind of something to tie the bottle here, because it's like it's floating as it is.
No, it's got Velcro on the back.
That's good.
It's good, it's good. Can I see the image?
Let's just go on. So this was Arjuna's drawing, concept art.
Well, yeah, he looks cool. He's come a long way from the first game. He's a rougher, meaner guy.
That's the-
Compared to he was the messenger, no?
Yeah. Well, he's still not fight, as a character.
No,
But
he's not. He's not, absolutely. I mean, he's become a bit of a survivor.
He's good at collecting
stuff, and he's good at surviving in the last minute. He's got a bit more flexibility than other characters, but he's quite weak combat-wise. Can I see do you have the image of the first one, side by side?
Somewhere.
Put them up side by side, can you?
Oh.
This is the old one.
And a few years later.
Ta-da.
Yeah, that's
That's
nice.
a big difference.
That's a nice progression, yeah, both in the art style and his.
Yeah, so this is still Arjuna.
Mm-hmm.
This was what? How
The
many years?
artist.
2 years ago? 3 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the new. So this was the art style for Posthuman, and this is the new art style for Posthuman Saga.
That's a nice progression. They show the miniature again of the scavenger. Let's compare it to the old miniature that we had.
Yeah, it looks better.
No, poor guy, come on. It's like a low-tech versus high-tech version.
Has a bit more character, I think.
And doesn't have a weird gun sticking out from the middle of his belly.
It's a machete.
So, Gordon and Mark, how did Mighty Boards come about?
Well, we started off as part of a video game studio called Mighty Box.
Evolved from there. So there's a journey to it. We didn't just decide to do it. It was we started from a video game company.
Yeah, we were working on several titles, and one of them was a post-apocalyptic game that had a strategic element to it, and it had come from a board game design I had. So we said, okay, let's make a board game and a video game in this universe that we were creating that we had put a lot of sort of work into developing. And we didn't expect it to be such a success on Kickstarter, I guess, and it was. So then that took up quite a bit of time for Mighty Box, and then we went back to doing video games. But I think me and Mark,
we wanted to keep on doing board games.
So your first game was about 3 years ago. It was Posthuman, right? Considering it was your first game, like what were the challenges you had to face back then with it?
Oh, everything was totally new. As in, we had never produced a board game before, like commercially, to actually sell it. We had never used crowdfunding before, so that was a totally new experience. It was our only option because obviously
we didn't have the funds.
To do it, and it costs a lot to make a board game, as we discovered.
There were several challenges as well that came out of the fact that we were developing a video game for Posthuman and the board game concurrently within the same world, and they were meant to dovetail into each other, like the story, the mechanics, and so on. So we all of us have quite a strong role-playing and wargaming background, and we obviously have played a lot of board games as well, but I guess we were used to a lot of simulation and not simulation mechanics, so we were trying to simulate an open. I had too many design goals for it, and I wanted it to be scalable for a different number of players, so it'll be as good solo as it's for 4 or 5 players, whatever. We like long games ourselves, so the time hadn't bothered us as much. The people we tested with didn't bother the length so much. And we were trying to have this open world, this modular system that would create a roguelike kind of feel to a board game. And that was, I think, quite innovative, particularly at the time.
And the story element was very important, but we didn't really put a lot of story in it, but we ourselves, as a team, we had loads and loads of story. I mean, the lore of it that we had to come up with just so that when we're building the game, we're actually doing it with a background, with a lot of context, is huge. We never really used it in the game then, but
No,
the idea was to release it slowly then through the video game. But the world
Yeah.
is there. It's a very rich world. It's a huge world.
I think we were too subtle in hinting at the world, and of course it's from that now from a retrospect, like we almost the feel is there, and so it worked because the game has been liked mainly because of the theme and the feel it has. But we didn't put discrete lore into the world, and the big challenge I think was trying to. I really wanted to bridge like elements of Euro style mechanics with a thematic game and have an emergent story rather than script one, and that requires a lot of little rules to try and create those images in the player's mind, and some randomness, because randomness does bring in, create a sort of engine of that represents the world, that creates events for you. While if you have a more tactical game or more streamlined game, then usually the sort of images that are generated in the mind from that rule set tend to be a bit narrower. So yeah, we were trying to juggle a lot of things together. I think that was one of the big challenges.
Okay, so after Posthuman, what other games came along?
And Vengeance.
Vengeance and Petrichor sort of were developed at the same time. We developed Vengeance here with our team in Malta, and Petrichor was developed by David Kirkhope and David Tursi and Volunteer. And then
During this period, the company came together. So yeah, now there's Knights of Fire, which is the sequel
On
to.
Kickstarter, right now?
Yeah.
yeah,
So now you're working on Posthuman Saga,
yep.
right?
Yes.
How's that going?
Crazy.
So yeah, Posthuman Saga is basically a standalone game in the posthuman world. It has some similarities in feel and the fact that it's a journey like the first Posthuman, but the system is completely different. And I'd say it's more of a tactical survival kind of journey, meaning there's tighter mechanics, there's less randomness than the first game, and yeah, it's overall a more streamlined experience, and there's more scripted story. We initially started off with the idea of making expansions for Posthuman. We were planning a series of expansions for the first Posthuman, and we worked on them quite a bit. But while they worked to some degree, we kept bumping, or at least, okay, let me talk about myself. I kept bumping into the issue that there were people who really love Posthuman and people who had gripes about it. And the gripes could easily be summarized into four main challenges, three of which I could really see were quite a bit of an issue. Not as much for the game itself, but in extending it. It really narrowed the design space possible for it. One of them, for example, is the mutation system, the side switching, which is really cool. But when to have a side switching mechanic in expansions with some new gameplay, not just content, it was very difficult to do because we don't know when they're going to change. Posthuman has tested and iterated a lot to get that balance right, but it works on that arc. And we wanted to create different, a bit of different gameplay. As I'm developing the expansion, I felt like I wanted to fix those things that people weren't happy with.
Yeah, and then I think we're also coming up with new ideas as well
Yeah.
for the game, and like, this would be really cool. No, but it doesn't work with the other one. You know, it's like, but we really want to put it there, but no, it doesn't work with the other one.
Yeah.
And then we came to a point where we really had to take a serious, discussion about, listen, does it make sense to try and keep on pushing the expansion, or should we just... Now we're designing more, I think, with expansions in mind. Thinking, okay, if we had to do an expansion, can this system take it? Is this design?
Yeah.
Is this robust enough to take an expansion? Is it?
And we wanted to further the story. So this Posthuman Saga takes place a good year after the events of the first game. The video game ties into that. I can't say how yet. Because the video game has quite a strong story arc, and Posthuman Saga feeds into that. So that was another important part of this all. Like the expansions, we needed them to push the story forward, and that was quite difficult to do, because if you change it to a mutant after the first game, then what happened? So yeah, and this time we already have 2 expansions designed for it, basically.
But what we're doing is moving the story forward. So between the first game, the video game, and this game, the story is moving forward in the world, but in a different game. So it's not an expansion of the first one, but it's a different board game, but the story gives you. So for whoever played the first one, it's a way of continuing the story, but with a different game.
And there's a lot of story.
And
for
there's a lot of
Posthuman.
story.
we decided to stop being coy about the whole lore and story, and I don't know why we did that initially, to be honest, and actually to delve more, to communicate a lot more of that lore. It's not all there, but there are more hints, and because there's a storybook with it, we have a lot more space and real estate rather than just on random cards to put in a lot more feel, a lot more space, exploring the world in a spatial way. That is obviously difficult to do on just a mini card.
So there is a lot of people who are into this post-apocalyptic theme in movies and games and so on. Why do you think that is, and what is it that attracts you to it?
Well, for me, it's how close it is to the now. Like it could happen in 10 years' time. Something can happen and you end up, or even less. There's a war or something. It could be next year. So I can easily see myself in it. So it's kind of, you can easily project kind of yourself into that situation without it being like science fiction or fantasy. Science fiction is far away. Fantasy is kind of completely another world. So, well, that's that theme kind of, and visually, I think it speaks to me a lot as well. So the environment, how the environment changes, and some of the situations, and I don't know. I'm interested in what we would be wearing, what we would be doing in that situation. I think there's a lot of So that's I don't know, from my part.
A lot of similar. Just visually, I similarly like that. I love to think about how the world would be without our presence, right? And really inspired by Wiseman's *The World Without Us*, a book that explores what would happen if humans disappeared in 5-10 years' time and so on. But for me, there are several threads to it. I've been researching post-apocalyptic literature and theory and patterns of post-apocalyptic cults and stuff like that through time. And there are 2 main lines of interest there. One is that it seems like it's a cyclical phenomenon. Since we've had a notion of a linear time, this idea of an end has always been there. And I think also there's this, I think subconscious, that we're seeing a lot more post-apocalyptic movies come out, for example, and games and so on. While they've been there for a while, in recent years, that there's been more of an uptake of this, because I think there's an unconscious or conscious fear that we are facing a paradigm shift. Not necessarily an end of times, a Mad Maxian situation, but that things as we know them are going to shift. And that of course brings in a factor of massive unknown, where it could be no electricity and no nations to a different way of doing business or whatever, right? So on the spectrum. And I think, so that's one thing that really interests me, and placing ourselves in that situation. But I think
that allows you to play with what if, so okay, what if this and this are not here anymore, what would you do?
And placing yourself in that world. So that was a big motivation behind the first Posthuman especially, and that's why we have character customization. We try to keep the characters very much like, us, the gamer, the mountaineer, whatever, the philosopher. But I think that there's there's another element. This is a random theory of mine about why we're fascinated with the post-apocalypse. I think it has to do with the fact that we're so saturated by technology, especially communication technology, that requires from us this increasingly fast feedback loop of response and hive-mindedness. I have an idea, I have a thought, I ping it to and expect a reply. I think that we are not adapting in time to that rapid change. And what's creating is a desire for a simpler space.
More basic, rawer.
So I think that we have an unconscious desire for things to just shut down so that our brains stop shorting out. So that I think the fantasy of preppers is exactly that, right? To go and camp and have just books at
and suddenly you're just focusing on survival.
Yeah.
On the basic stuff, not also on all the frills of life.
And for your mind to actually...
And getting rid of the clutter.
Yes, getting rid of the clutter, exactly. And actually reading those books you've bought in the last couple of years and didn't read.
Yeah.
Right? And having people stop depending on you constantly. I think this is maybe a random theory, but I think there's something to it, right? And I wanted to project that simplicity, and I didn't want it to be a grim, the road kind of experience only. I wanted there to be those moments of light.
And do speak of board games as being something cozy that you play together,
Yeah.
right? And a post-apocalyptic game doesn't seem like a cozy game to play. But coming back to this, then yes, it makes sense, because then it is a cozy game to play, because suddenly we can forget about all the things of modern life that kind of...
All the pressures, the mounting pressures. I think it's an acceleration as well.
Just focusing on very basic things, like surviving, eating.
Yeah.
You have one book that you can read and it makes you happy, because
and appreciating the space around you and nature. Of course, the role of nature in this world taking over space is also something that I think we're attracted to, and that's what we're trying to bring out.
Bringing cozy back to post-apocalyptic.
Cozying the end of the world. Yeah, that's us.
So you think growing up in Malta has inspired some of this post-apocalyptic love, or?
Are you saying that we live in a rusted shithole? Wow.
I don't know. It might be that we long for a less crowded place, I guess.
I think there's a fear that we've had unconsciously as well as Maltese, because we don't produce enough water. We don't produce enough water for 25% of the population. We don't produce enough food. If we're cut off from the rest of the world,
how would we survive?
Pretty soon. I think that there's a fear, an inherent fear that has been that we've inherited from our grandparents and other generations that have seen a very harsh reality in the Second World War, where most of the population lived underground, right? And had means of hiding from constant bombardment and just a long history of being attacked, basically.
Yeah, our ancestors have been survivors. They have the mindset of a survivor. You know, they in their daily lives, I think even our parents were like that, but as in the sense that they inherited from their grandparents, and
of course it's a fear of scarcity.
They're very frugal with their with what they had,
and the obsession to store a lot, right? That comes from a scarcity mentality, coming from being very close to times when population was starving because of being sieged. So we've been sieged throughout our history by different massive powers compared to being a 23-kilometer island.
And so around us, we have walled cities, we have shelters everywhere, dug out in stone.
Catacombs.
Yes.
The whole island is riddled with underground networks it's designed to withstand attacks, bombardment in every way. Yeah, from massive bastions to these underground places. So I think it's a bit hard to get away from that. I mean, I grew up not having forests and mountains and stuff like that. I mean, I grew up exploring underground passages under, knights' fortresses and stuff like that. I mean, that's where I spent most of my childhood, in ruins. A lot of Malta was ruined back, especially when we were young, in our teenage years. The fortresses that are now pretty and fixed were abandoned.
Yeah.
So there's rusted stuff, and it was a beautiful adventure for us. It wasn't for me, it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, a lot of buildings destroyed after the Second World War were never repaired again. Now there's a kind of a revival of these areas and the gentrification of all the cities, and everything is being repaired and made to look pretty.
And there were a lot of wealth that wasn't there when we were young. So the government did not have any funds to fix these beautiful castles. They were just left to rot, basically. I remember like the Malta Island Fortress still having pots and pans left there by the British when they left. And diaries from the war stuffed into toilets that I found, stuff like that was just left there. So yeah, it's all around us basically. I think it does maybe have an influence. I didn't think of it so much, but yeah.